Good morning, it's book talk time. This week I managed to read 2 books, and I also, on my last video, I forgot to tell you all about a book that I had also finished last week. I'll go ahead and tell you about that one first. The book that I finished last week is part of a series. Book 1 in the series is called The Girl at Midnight, which we have, and book 2, which I read last week, is called The Shadow Hour. We don't have that yet. But it was really good. Sometimes when you're reading a trilogy, the second book is a little slow and kind of feels like just a placeholder in between book 1 and book 3. This one was pretty good, though. The premise of the story is there is a human girl who's the main character, and she, in the first book, you hear all her backstory and everything. She was raised by some beings called Avicen. They're kind of like bird people, and she had escaped in a terrible home situation and was raised by them in a library. So, kind of a cool setting. And throughout the first book, she discovers there are these creatures called the Dracarin, which are like basically dragon people. And the 2 different creatures have overlapping destinies, basically. So there are things that both groups are trying to do, they're trying to prevent each other from doing, and in the first book, the human girl is looking for what's called the Firebird. Okay, and I'm not going to tell you too much about it because I don't want to spoil the first book for you, but the second book has a whole lot to do with the Firebird, and also a creature that is basically its direct opposite. Instead of being a creature of flame and both destruction and regeneration, it is a creature of shadow. Okay, but I'm not going to tell you any more about that. So if you're interested, I think book 1 is checked out right now, but you can always put things on hold and we can give them to you when they come in. And I'll be buying the Shadow Hour later. The other book, the book that I read this week, is also the second book in a series. The first book is called Kiss of Deception, and it's also checked out right now. But this second book, it's quite hefty and took me a little while to get into it, not because the book was slow, but just because I was kind of, distracted by a lot of other stuff. But once I got into the book, premise of the first book is that there's a girl, she is royalty, and in this particular world, first daughters of royalty are assumed to potentially have what they call the gift. And the gift is basically kind of like a low-key clairvoyance. They may or may not have visions, they may or may not hear voices, they may or may not be able to see things that are going to happen in the future, know that something's about to happen, stuff like that. That's about as magical as you get in the book. It is in the fantasy section. But in the first book, she is supposed to be marrying this prince from another kingdom, and she decides right at the beginning, I'm not having any of that. Me and my maidservant now run away, and they do. And at the very beginning of the book, they run away, and they're pursued by both the prince she was supposed to marry and an assassin from another kingdom who is going to kill her. Okay, and they both find her, and then things happen, and I don't want to tell you everything about it. But in the second book, it's obviously a continuation of the story, what happens after the first book, and in the second book, like I said, it was really good, and there was a lot of action and stuff, and intrigue and conspiracy, and learning things about the particular culture. But the thing about this, the thing about this book is that right at the end, you're reading along and you're thinking, okay, things are going to wrap up here, and then I was reading this, but literally the last 20 pages of the book, I'm like this. I was like, oh my gosh, what has just happened? I totally didn't see that coming, and then something else immediately happens that I totally didn't see coming, and then the very end of the book, you're like, okay, good thing the third book is out, so that I don't have to wait a forever long time to read it. I've got it on hold at Reads, but there's 4 people ahead of me, so I'll have to wait a little while. I also finished reading The Unwanteds with Sam at home, and he's ready for the second book. This is kind of like a 5 or 6 book series. I mentioned this before in another video. It says right here, The Hunger Games meets Harry Potter, and that is one of my big pet peeves. I hate when books are described as this book meets this book, because usually it's absolutely nothing like that. Okay, this is not Harry Potter meets Hunger Games that has, to me, it's absolutely nothing like the Hunger Games. It's absolutely nothing like Harry Potter, except for the fact that there are kids and magic in it. Okay, that's about all. In this book, it's set in a place called Quill. Quill is kind of boring and drab. You're not allowed to do things like tell stories or draw pictures or be funny or anything like that. You just work. And when a child turns 13, they're either wanted or unwanted. If they're determined to be unwanted, they are taken off and they're supposed to be killed. But at the very beginning, they reveal to you that they're not killed. They are taken to this world called Arteme, where magic exists, and people are trained to use creativity and art as weapons, okay, for both defense and offense. So, and if you're interested, this one's back in the library. You can start this series if you like. And that's all I have for you today, and I will see you on Thursday with a tip.